I would like to use this opportunity today to talk to you about my research on parliamentary contestation and party unity in the German parliament, which I have approached from a discursive angle, which then induced me to introduce a couple of methods from other fields into my research, methods which enabled me to capture some of the multitude of relations in parliamentary debates. The main motivation of this talk and the manuscript it is based on is to give more theoretical and methodological backbone to my empirical research on the contestation and decontestation of the Euro crisis in the German Bundestag between 2010 and 2015. The project has so far resulted in 3 papers, 2 of which are published and 1 is in the pipeline. And I'm now looking at this work collectively to formulate some of the ideas which have informed my methodological choices. I'm still in the process of developing this broader framework, so I would be really grateful for any comments or suggestions you may have. The main objective is to make some broader arguments about structure agency problems and the necessity of relational approaches in parliamentary research. My project started with the idea that I'm using the case of Bundestag debates on the Euro crisis in order to shed more light on the parliamentary processes and mechanisms behind the frequently referred to politicization of EU politics. In the literature on the role of national parliaments in the EU, the primary focus of analysis has typically been the parliament as a collective actor or the European Affairs Committee. In my work, I wanted to shift the level of analysis to individual MPs, but an individual MP does not act in isolation, but as a member of larger organizations such as the party group. An MP's publicly visible activities are both enabled and constrained by other actors and institutional factors. In this case study, I identified party control and institutional rules as 2 decisive factors that shape individual level behavior. So one objective was to put the individual MP at the center of analysis while taking into account that the MP is one among many. The second objective was to find an approach that can capture some of the dynamics of processes like mobilization and contestation. A parliamentary debate or vote does not take place in a vacuum because it relates to previous debates and votes and sets at least some of the conditions for future debates or votes. And over the course of this project, I've realized how much methods can enable us to generate novel empirical insights, but they can also be very limiting. So weighing up the benefits and limitations of different methods with regards to the research question is a crucial step in the research process. And I think I learned that the hard way. So before I delve deeper into my methods, I would like to make a few general points about structure and agency. The structure and agency debate keeps social scientists busy because it touches upon the fundamental question of human capacity and individual autonomy. And even though structure agency problems are often at least indirectly addressed in empirical studies of legislative behavior, parliamentary roles, rules, etc., I think in parliamentary studies we would benefit from more theorizing on structure and agency. Also, Parliament is like such a great lab because we know a lot about who the MPs are. We have historical records of MPs' actions and inactions, and we also have records of at least the written rules of Parliament and how they have changed over time. Within this debate on structure and agency, I'm drawn most to structuration theory, which goes back to Anthony Giddens' work. Giddens and others who followed his line of thinking sit pretty much in the middle, in that they do not give precedence to either agency or structure in explaining social action. They suggest that we should study the processes at the interface where agents are bounded by rules and conditions produced by social structures, which they may not fully comprehend, and where their compliant, habitual, or reflexive action then determines whether the social structure is reproduced or modified. Giddens distinguishes between different kinds of structure, and discourse as a mode of encoding meaning is one of them. Structuration theory does not prescribe a particular methodology, but it induces us to see Parliament as a social organization and to pay more attention to social and other types of relations. In my research, I focused on 4 types of relations. First, relations between actors. There's a hierarchy and division of labor among MPs in general and within party groups. You can only be a frontbencher, for example, if there are people on the backbenches. And the extent to which an MP is considered a party rebel depends on what the party leaders and the majority of their party colleagues are doing. Temporal relations are also very important. A parliamentary debate or vote is not ahistorical. There was probably at least one debate or vote about the same or very similar topic in the past, and there will be one in the future. Also, MPs have a track record which makes up a parliamentary career. Therefore, a dissenting speech or vote, for example, by an MP is rarely an isolated incident or act. Thirdly, there are relations between actors and discourses. This one basically addresses the question, how does the discourse surrounding a topic change when the actors who participate in the debate change? This question led me to look more closely at rules, which, as I will discuss in a minute, have a significant impact on debate participation. A discourse is also made up of distinct elements, such as claims, frames, narratives. So how do we determine, for example, which claims made in a parliamentary debate form a coherent frame? And how can we track systematically whether the discourse becomes more polarized over time? These questions and considerations about a variety of relations in parliament and parliamentary discourse have informed my methodological choice, and I will talk you through these choices and a couple of key findings from each of the papers. In the first paper, which is co-authored with my colleague Achilles, we looked for mobilization patterns, and we looked at 3 types of parliamentary activity: giving a speech, defecting from the party line in a vote, and giving a vote explanation, which is a written statement. During these 5 years, voting unity has been below average for all parties, and at the same time, the number of written statements, which in normal circumstances are not used very much at all, has been very high. In the German Bundestag, contrary to, for instance, the House of Commons, the party group leaders decide who gets to speak on the plenary floor, which tends to lead to an overrepresentation of party leaders and other loyal frontbenchers on the plenary floor, which was definitely also the case in these debates. Generally, we found that those MPs who were underrepresented on the floor, namely backbenchers, newcomers, and women, were more likely to use vote explanations as an alternative, though less visible, channel of communication. The more interesting part was when we went beyond the static analysis and checked the impact of previous actions by adding lagged dependent variables. This revealed that MPs who defected in one vote were much more likely to defect in the next vote as well. And the most interesting result is that an MP who issued a written vote explanation was more likely to cast a deviant vote at the next debate. So this analysis using lagged variables shows that MPs' track records matter and that there are different stages and means of defection. Thus, looking at party unity in terms of voting only tells us part of the story, which leads me to the next paper. So looking at the debates on the Greek crisis, I investigate party unity from a discursive perspective. As I already mentioned, gatekeeping the plenary floor is a very important instrument in the toolbox of party leaders to maintain party unity in the German case. But in theory, every MP has the opportunity to give a written vote explanation for each roll call vote. Therefore, I wanted to compare how inter and intra-party contestation play out in these 2 communication channels. So I hand-coded all plenary speeches and a written vote explanation, and I then employed discourse network analysis, which was developed by Philipp Leifeld. This method has become very popular, but so far it has been used mostly to study coalition building between political organizations and stakeholders through media content analysis. I try to show in this paper that discourse network analysis is also very useful for the analysis of coherence and conflict within political organizations and groups, such as parliament and parties. Social network analysis has been used to study co-sponsorship networks in the US context, but there is much more untapped potential for network analytical techniques in parliament studies. As the name suggests, discourse network analysis combines discourse analysis, more precisely qualitative content analysis, with social network analysis. And the key advantage is that it bridges the gap between content-focused and actor-centered approaches, therefore enabling us to explain changes in political discourse through shifts in actor participation and actor constellations. I do not have the time today to talk you through everything, so I'll just show you a couple of graphs to illustrate what can be done. So these are subtract networks for 5 debates. Speeches are in the top row and written statements in the bottom row. The nodes are the MPs and they're color-coded by party. The color of the edge between two actors indicates whether in some they agreed, then it's gray, or disagreed, red, with each other regarding the claims they made. The actor constellations for plenary speeches reflect the government opposition divide quite well, and modularity analysis confirmed that contestation has constantly clustered into 2 coalitions. In contrast, we observe that even though there are distinct clusters, thus coalitions, for the written statements, it's more difficult, like we cannot easily explain that by the government opposition divide. I carried out some more social network statistics, which also confirmed that government parties display higher discursive unity on the plenary floor, while it is the other way around for written statements, so opposition parties were more cohesive in vote explanations. And I did some more stuff in this paper, like developing a contestedness score and doing more detailed analysis of the Christian Democrats, but I suppose if you're interested, you can check it out. So in the previous 2 papers, I have demonstrated the impact that party control and party-centered rules of speech-making have on actor participation in plenary debates. In this paper, I wanted to analyze the impact of this on the actual content of the debate, that is the parliamentary discourse. I do this by comparing the most disputed claims, the overall levels of contestedness and discourse structures in plenary speeches and vote explanations. A key finding is that discursive contestations happens mostly by proposing a competing frame or narrative rather than by directly disputing the political opponent's arguments. And this is one reason why today I'm only going to talk about the 3rd part, the structural analysis of discourse. This time I did not use discourse network analysis, which is a co-occurrence approach, but I employed association rule learning, which allows us to test whether the mentioning of one claim actually increases the likelihood of another claim. So association rule mining is a method which was originally developed to analyze consumer behavior in market basket analysis by identifying which items tend to be purchased together. But it is a very versatile machine learning technique for discovering regularities in the form of rules in large relational databases which contain transactions. In this case, a transaction is one speech or one vote explanation. From these association rules, I then generated network graphs, and by studying the structure of these graphs, we can identify and compare discursive frames across different communication channels and time. Measuring the graph density has revealed that MPs' written expressions form a more interconnected discourse than plenary speeches, which after closer interpretation of the networks means that MPs give more detailed accounts and coherent arguments in written vote explanations, even though on average they're considerably shorter than speeches. Here I'm showing you the networks for one of the debates. It is a debate on the extension of the second aid package for Greece in February 2015. On the left is the network for speeches, on the right for vote explanations, and the colors indicate the clusters, meaning frames. This is a good illustration of how on both sides, the side in favor of strict conditionality and fiscal consolidation, so that's the blue and green clusters, and the anti-austerity side, that's yellow, orange, red, and pink. Vote explanations serve as an important deliberative tool to add more substantial arguments as well as more extreme views, especially so from government MPs. Interestingly, political alternatives, both on the right and left, are also debated in vote explanations before they appear in plenary debates, so that's another interesting time dynamic here. I'm arguing in the paper that while some differences can be explained by the different formats, for example, as we would expect, we see more party political point scoring on the plenary floor, we cannot merely reduce it to the written versus oral format. Vote explanations do provide a channel to express views that are underrepresented on the floor, which clearly demonstrates that the more diverse speakers list would have made a difference in how the plenary discourse evolved. I think I have used up my time, so just I want to finish with a very brief statement, just saying, as me personally as a researcher who does not really feel married to a particular epistemological or methodological position, I am personally very happy to borrow methods and techniques from elsewhere. In this case, I found social network analysis and discourse network analysis and association remaining very useful and not that difficult to incorporate into a mixed method framework. And thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to any questions or comments.